office. Although, interestingly, listening to the words that Steve Baker used, it doesn't sound like he believes that Boris Johnson may have lied to Parliament deliberately, just that Boris Johnson should have been held to a higher standard than everyone else because the rules that were imposed were so draconian for everyone. When it comes to this parliamentary investigation, it's very possible that the result of that investigation will be that the Prime Minister didn't knowingly mislead the House, because this is the crucial qualifier, whether or not a minister knowingly misleads the House. In your view, do you think that Boris Johnson knew what he was doing was against the rules, whether or not it was or not?
Well, personally, I do think Boris Johnson misled the House. And bear in mind, we've only had the result of 1 or 2 police reviews of events and 1 fine of Boris Johnson. It's possible, we don't know, there could be more fines, and it's possible those could be for something that does meet the threshold of what looks and sounds more like a party rather than just a gathering before a meeting and a cake. But as I understand your question, you're talking about lying, and that's very important. And for the last 100 years or so, the idea that you lie in Parliament has been a resigning offence. But I actually think we're beyond that now, not just because of the personal criticism of Boris Johnson, but also the loss of confidence. And I think it's important to bear in mind that who the people are with the power. We are the voters, but there is not going to be a general election next week or next month. To me, Keir Starmer's given some good speeches, but all he can do is pile on more pressure. The real power brokers are the Tory backbenchers, because they can force out Boris Johnson, as early as next week or next month. They, in effect, forced out Theresa May. They forced David Cameron into a referendum which destroyed his career, and they forced out Margaret Thatcher. So look at that history. That, I think, is even more important in terms of the political future than the immediate question about lying and fines by the police.
He said that the Conservative Parliamentary Party is a pretty regicidal organisation, more so potentially than the Labour Party, which seems to stick with ailing leaders for a longer period of time than the Conservatives. However, I do want to pick you up on what you mentioned there about the fact that maybe in this particular event, the one that Boris Johnson has received a fine for so far, that 19th of June event in the Cabinet Room, you seem to imply that maybe Boris Johnson might have legitimately thought he wasn't breaking rules for that particular event, but it's the chance that he will be fined for something later on that may well be the grounds for misleading the House. If I've understood you correctly in your analysis there, is what happened yesterday not all a little bit premature?
There's ambiguity, I would say. So I think the police have decided Boris Johnson should be fined, so that's evidently the right thing because they've reviewed it. But he's avoided talking too much about the specifics. So Boris Johnson has tried to create this air of ambiguity, whereas Rishi Sunak, and I can't remember if this was on the record or off the record, but Rishi Sunak has kind of let it be known. He just turned up a few minutes early for a meeting on COVID with the Prime Minister, and he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Rishi Sunak is essentially sending the kind of implicit message that he's been hard done by. But there isn't particularly an expectation that Rishi Sunak, from what we've read in the newspapers, is going to be fined again and again and again. But it's quite possible Boris Johnson will be fined again. And it's quite possible that, to my mind, a breach is a breach, but it's quite possible there'll be for greater or more flagrant breaches. And David Gauke, the former cabinet minister, made this joke on Twitter about, does Boris just keep retweeting his apology each time he's fined? But that's the risk, because remember, there's one issue about law breaking, which is very important. Boris is the first prime minister to break the law in office, but there's also a point about public disgust and parliamentary disgust, and that's where the issue of how flagrant the breaches comes in. Remember, if you're a member of the public or an MP that said goodbye to a dying loved one over Zoom, then it's not just the technicalities of the breach, it's actually the moral content of what went on.
And I think that is the powerful point, that no matter how much Boris Johnson tries to explain the particularities of any event or the other, the fact that people were in the room anyway for work and maybe a bottle of wine was opened after that meeting, was that reasonably necessary? Did other people do it? At what stage in the various levels of restriction was it? Was it a tier 1? Was it a tier 2? Was it the first bit of lockdown easing? Were people allowed to see dying relatives or not at the moment at which it happened? Almost none of that matters, because it's the impression that's given to so many people. I suppose we'll have to wait and see whether more of these fines do come about,